body of a 21-year-old Korean male was found on a casino skywalk after apparently falling 17 floors. A hotel guest spotted the body shortly after dawn. Checked in the previous day around 8 a.m. It sure looks like suicide.
In the press, the young man's death stirred barely a ripple of interest until it emerged who he was. He lived on a palatial estate. His father was famous, a modern-day messiah.
He's a great teacher, he's a great prophet, and the Messiah.
We see him as the Lord of the universe, the first person coming as God's representative.
A convicted felon, he controls wealth beyond imagination.
That's the heart of Moon's psyche, is the drive, the need for power.
Clean technology.
He thinks he can literally buy countries.
Absolutely.
He leads a church or a cult.
He's quoted as saying this, is that we want absolute control of the mind. And to me, that means brainwashing.
He marries off total strangers.
Reverend Moon is sort of a world's finest matchmaker.
They're given a kendo stick, and the woman has to bend over, and the man hits her 3 times as hard as he can with the kendo stick.
He crusaded against communism.
Who did liberate communism? To me, very clear. It's the Reverend Moon.
His stated aim is world domination.
You have to be prepared to die for him, and he says that.
He's Sun Myung Moon, leader of the Moonies.
He'd clap his hands and he'd say, where I'm going is to the kingdom of heaven, and I want you to come with me. All those of you who want to come with me, come ahead. The rest of you, out of my way. One of the things they say in their prayers is, crush Satan, out Satan, crush Satan, out Satan. Oh, it was tremendously exciting. These were the end times. These are the last days. And we had the great blessing to be on the side of the Son of God. I loved him. I adored him.
There is an awesome feeling when you are near him. You feel in the presence of an enormous power.
This is a man who's going towards his destiny regardless of what anybody else thinks, says, or does.
Moon says that from soon after his birth in 1920, in a village in North Korea, he was clairvoyant and could see the future. His legend is strange and fascinating. At age 15, his followers believe, he walked up into the mountains one Easter morning to pray. There were clouds tipped with gold. Jesus stepped out of the clouds.
Put his hand on his head. And the voice was very clear. Now, you want to take over my undone mission. I will be walking every step of the day with you.
Moon protested he was unworthy, but Jesus insisted.
To me, Reverend Moon coming to this world is the second coming of Christ.
Well, his power is greater than Jesus because Jesus is working with him. So 2 is better than 1. And many people have seen this, spiritually. When Reverend Moon speaking, they see Jesus next to him.
Then his followers believe other prophets appeared.
Met with Buddha, met with Muhammad, met with the Confucius. He had many, many incredible spiritual encounters.
So Jesus and the Reverend Moon are working together?
Absolutely, absolutely. But not only, Jesus is working with Reverend Moon in America. In the Islam is Muhammad. In Asia, in Asia is Buddha.
He came down from the mountain transformed. In his village, Moon was supposed to have wisdom beyond his years. He was seen to wrestle trees on the hillside in a state of trance. Before World War II, Korea was under Japanese occupation. Koreans were ordered to follow the Japanese Shinto faith. Now nearly 20, Moon says his struggle was not with the Japanese. It was with the devil.
I have never seen any man so dedicated to God.
Legend has it that at his home in Seoul, overwhelmed by the suffering of God, he would cry for days on end. Once his tears leaked into the room below. As Japan made ready for to Tokyo to study engineering.
I asked him, why you don't go to missionary school, seminary school, why you go to engineering course? He's laughing, smile, and he explained, he's not necessary to theological seminary.
Because God had told him that he was the Messiah.
Absolutely, of course.
As Moon saw it, evil began in the Garden of Eden. Eve tasted the forbidden fruit. She had sex with Lucifer, the archangel. Then she had sex with Adam.
But for Reverend Moon, it's quite clear there was a sex relationship. Why so? That's very simple, because what's the part of Adam and Eve they hide after that? If they have eaten some apple, they would hide the mouth, but they hide the sexual parts.
Her original sin was transmitted to future generations. Hence, the fall of man. There was famine and pestilence. As Moon told his followers, he was the third Adam, here to restore the perfect world that God had designed.
You have no way to know that Reverend Moon is the Messiah just looking at him. He was praying more than 17 hours every day. He's a man of prayer. Through him, I feel elevated closer to God.
Ironically, Moon's church was born out of suffering. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Japanese surrendered and pulled their troops out of Korea.
I now invite the representatives of the Emperor of Japan to sign the instrument of surrender.
Now there was religious freedom in Korea. Back in Seoul, Moon got married. According to legend, he told his wife he was going out to buy rice for their new baby. He never came back. God told him to go to North Korea to preach.
His way of teaching, it was just simply fascinating. All the conventional questions resolved automatically, like a snow melting.
His belief that Korea had spawned a new Messiah outraged many Christians.
Reverend Moon was accused as heretic.
Worse still, Soviet troops were swarming into North Korea, stifling freedom of worship almost as soon as it began. Today, Moon's followers are told he was framed by the new communist regime of Kim Il-sung, punished for speaking the word of God.
He was absolutely incredibly tortured by the communist police. Incredible. He was just virtually beaten to death.
He was sent to North Korea's Hungnam death camp.
none of the prisoners survived in that prison more than 18 months.
In his book, Divine Principle, which lays out his theology, Moon says he endured suffering unimagined by anyone in history. He suffered so much he atoned for the sins of mankind and became perfect.
Reverend Moon was sentenced to death to that death camp for 5 years imprisonment.
In 1950, North Korea invaded the South. War had begun, a long confrontation between the Soviets and the West. Perversely, the Korean War saved Moon's life. UN bombers pounded the city where he was held. In the chaos, Moon was freed.
Day before, they were systematically killing all the prisoners, knowing that, UN forces coming up. Before Reverend Moon turned, luckily, the UN forces rushed the gate.
He joined thousands of refugees fleeing south to escape the communists. His followers speak with awe of how he carried an injured man across Korea.
Roughly 200 miles, walking and walking on a mountain. He carried him on the back. 80-kilogram man on the back, all the way to the south. To me, that alone shows him the Messiah, to me.
For years, the Moon organization used this photo as evidence before quietly conceding it was of someone else. In a tiny shack made of US Army ration boxes, Moon founded his Unification Church. He and his followers often went hungry.
Our tiny group, very poor. Under that circumstances, he trained us to overcome temptations of food.
In the decades that followed, Moon would become rich and powerful. His anthem, inevitably, Handel's Messiah. He'd be accused of breaking laws and seeking influence. He'd make friends in high places.
To me, that's the heart of Moon's psyche, is the drive, the need for power. He's not interested in people developing and finding themselves. He's interested in people finding him and kneeling to him and bowing to him and then giving him all their strength, all their energy, all their power.
His church would be accused of brainwashing teenagers and taking their assets.
All of your money, somebody else's money, their land, their property, any kind of real or material goods they have. Your job is to get a hold of that and bring it into the organization, because outside of the organization it has no meaning, it has no value. It's property owned by Satan.
Moon would talk openly of controlling the earth. The whole world is in my hands, and I will conquer and subjugate the world.
Just as he claims to be a man of love, and yet if you look at any of his speeches will exude hatred towards those who disagree with it.
From the beginning, Moon believed that rival churches, the media, even the Korean government, were out to get him.
Just like Jesus Christ came 2,000 years ago, encountered the incredible opposition of those days of the existing religion.
In Seoul in the 50s, there were stories that Moon was having sex with female converts to purify them.
There were women coming to lectures who they'd rather be at lecture than being with their husbands or with their families. So their husbands could not understand what was going on. So for them, they must be having some kind of sexual relationship. There must be something wrong is going on in that place.
However, a later FBI report claimed that women students had been expelled from university in Seoul because of sexual initiation rites with Moon and some others.
Moon claimed that since he was the perfect man, a perfect Adam, by sleeping with women, he would purify women. And he did tell me that he did those things. It was God's work.
Divorcing his first wife, he married a woman 20 years younger than himself, Hak Jae-han. He and his new wife would be the true parents of all mankind. He told his followers, love true parents more than your own self, spouse, or children.
And he said, you know, you must know that I am your only parent and your father is bad for you. You must forget about him. You know, we are the true parents. I am the true parent.
In the early days, Moon lived above his church. His speeches would go on for half the night.
He never slept. Never. Continue until usually 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Never slept. His sleep time is always less than 3 hours, only 2 or 3 hours.
The Korean War had ended in a bizarre face-off between North and South. Surreal, yet deadly. It was a microcosm of what was happening all over the world. By the new Cold War.
Reverend Moon frequently said, the communist goal is to kick out God from the planet. The communistic ideology, it take over the entire world, then there's no room for God. We cannot allow God going out of this planet. We need God. Reverend Moon from the day one is truly the anti-communist.
To Moon, communist North Korea was satanic, and its Stalinist leader, Kim Il-sung, the devil.
If communists win in Cold War, and if the entire world is communized, there's no room for free men to stand.
In Seoul, nobody laughed at Moon anymore. The word now was that he had powerful new friends, including Kim Jong-pil, founder of South Korea's ferocious new intelligence agency, the KCIA. It crushed dissent. In Washington, the Americans heard that Kim Jong-pil was using Moon's church as a political tool. America was where Moon would make his future.
He looked at America as a chosen nation. So, in a most crucial role must be played by America.
Rather fortunately for Moon, he arrived in America at a time of great anguish. The Vietnam War had divided the generations.
I can't hold this day.
American cities were full of teenagers looking for answers.
Understand me.
Few knew why Americans were dying in Vietnam, or raining death on a country they'd barely heard of. Moon built his church on their self-doubt.
Here was a guy who was seemed to be totally sure. There was just this tremendous energy, tremendous force which he communicated. It was as though his whole body was going to one place, to one point.
We are not just ordinary Christians.
Teenagers would be intercepted on the street by Moonies. Often they'd be invited to some innocuous seminar.
These individuals were just unusually open and honest and friendly and caring and playful and sweet.
Catherine Mazer was taken to a house on Long Island.
And playful and sweet.
Catherine Mazer was taken to a house on Long Island.
The name Reverend Moon never came up. I actually asked when I was first going with them to the site if they were the Unification Church, and I was told no.
An FBI analyst wrote, Moon's success depends on very subtle, deceptive tactics. Finally, Catherine Mazer was told about Moon. He was her true parent. It would be dangerous to contact her real parents,
because they could be used by away the amazing gift of having met the Messiah, that Satan uses the ones you love to influence you away from the remarkable, unsurpassable gift you've been given.
She says the Moonies encouraged her to lie to her mother on the phone, not telling her where she really was.
But it was just important, whatever I told her, that I did not tell her that I was involved with the Unification Church.
And they were perfectly happy for you to lie?
I was encouraged to lie. I was asked to lie.
Catherine's worried family traced her to the house on Long Island.
And we need to see something.
I'm sorry, she's not here.
Okay.
I'm sorry, she's not here.
But you're not prepared to let Catherine see for herself?
They were too late.
Well, if you can't prove to us she's not here, then why should we leave under the assumption she's not here?
She'd been moved, but the Moonies wouldn't say where.
Oh, my. Right, you talk about it.
So you actually thought that your mother projected Satan?
Yeah, I thought she was being, you know, for all intents and purposes, possessed.
In trying to find you?
From the early 70s, Moon would be accused of brainwashing, mind control. Neil Salonen, once president of the church in America, says the Messiah never brainwashed his followers or cut them off from their parents.
Because we are family-based, in many cases, members for the first time began experiencing a deeper and closer relationship with their parents.
You're worried about the daughter. Okay, sir.
But when Catherine Mazer's parents arrived at Moon's mansion outside New York, guards called the police.
He's quoted as saying this is that we want absolute control of the mind. And to me, that means brainwashing.
And this brainwashing comes directly from Moon?
Absolutely, yeah.
So we should show up there?
Ex-Moonie Ron Paquette says he spoke to Moon's son about brainwashing.
And I said, in many ways, it reminds me sometimes of like the communist camps. And at that point he said, yeah, I know. He says, Father learned that when he was in prison camp. And I kept trying to make the point that, no, the way we bring in people and the way we control people is kind of like the way that this goes on in North Korean prison camps. And he kept saying, I know.
Belvedere was the first of Moon's magnificent estates in America. Once, it was owned by America's wealthiest families. In some cases, recruits would make over everything they owned to Moon, then go out selling trinkets at inflated prices.
I was sent out on the streets, sometimes for 14 or 16 hours at a time, sometimes in very dangerous neighborhoods.
Wandering big cities, Catherine Mazer lived on hamburgers and donuts.
There were many times where we were just on the side of basically a highway alone with hundreds of dollars of cash on our persons.
In the end, she decided to leave the Moonies.
I was told stories about other people who had betrayed the Messiah or who'd walked away. Something really bad could happen to me, whether it be illness or a random act of violence. I mean, I was scared. I was terrified.
Catherine went back to her mother. Others stayed, giving Moon their all.
They like to talk in the church about the blood, sweat, and tears of Moon. Well, I think, by and large, he's leaving off the blood, sweat, and tears of a lot of members.
he receives the treatment of a Messiah. And therefore we have the rituals of the court. And in this court, it is as pompous, it is as beautiful as being in the presence of an earthly king or queen, for example, the Queen Elizabeth. It's not Hollywood, it's real. That's the court of the Messiah. But after this is finished, he becomes a very, very ordinary man. He goes and digs his hands in the dirt, he examines pebbles, he goes into the mud, he goes and eats in McDonald's.
With this blessing ceremony, I thank you for that we build the superhighway to you.
The greatest honor for a Moonie is to be married by Moon.
It's like a pyramid marketing scheme, and it's embedded in the theology. You, in fact, cannot be married by Moon, which is the ultimate blessing according to their theology, until you've brought 3 people into the church who are ready to die in your place. Once you've brought 3 people in, then you have the right to be married. You have the right to be blessed by Moon.
He would even find you a partner, a total stranger.
I am blessing this.
Reverend Moon sees the family background and the future. So Reverend Moon is sort of a world's finest matchmaker.
Sometimes Moon would choose marriage partners from their photos.
Sometimes there's a picture matching, and sometimes the people, rows of men and women sit together, and he just picks you, and you're supposed to be husband and wife. And a lot of times, it doesn't work.
That marriage is far more durable and lasting longer. Of course, there's some breakages, but not like 50%, Western world.
Welcome to Blessing 97, World Peace Through Ideal Families.
The church claimed that millions of couples had been blessed by Moon in ceremonies from Seoul to Washington, even at the 2,000-room New Yorker hotel, bought by Moon for a few $1 million.
He looked down into my eyes, and I felt that he knew everything about me. And then he guided me to where my wife was already standing. And he looked at us, and then he just beckoned to us to go. And we went to another room and discussed whether we would like to continue with this match. And I really felt that this was God's choice, and I felt a lot of God's happiness and joy at that time.
Sometimes the matchings took a bizarre turn.
If they accept it, they come back in the room, and the first thing that they do in their relationship is they're given a kendo stick. And the woman has to bend over, and the man hits her 3 times as hard as he can with the kendo stick. And the audience then judges that. If you didn't hit hard enough, the man has to hit her again until the audience accepts the strength of the beating. Then the woman turns around, and she beats the man, and it's the same thing. So this is how these marriages made in heaven begin.
Moon seemed convinced of his own divinity.
But he was kind of like innocent in some way. I mean, he was very like a child amid all these big, important people.
Donna Collins' parents led the church in Britain.
You know, he seemed sweet at times.
Dream technology, yes. Moon seemed anything but sweet to church leader Alan Tate Wood, summoned to his home in South Korea. A man lay prostrate on the floor in front of the Messiah.
And from that position, he made some kind of greeting to Mr. Moon. And Mr. Moon then barked something back. And they had a conversation. This man never raised his head off the ground. He was looking into the rug. And when this was going on, I began to understand that this is how I am to relate to Mr. Moon. And through me, they're teaching all Americans how we are to relate to Mr. Moon.
By the 70s, Moon was beginning to enjoy fame and fabulous wealth. In Asia, he was building an industrial empire, processing titanium and ginseng, making machinery and guns. Over the years, church income would grow phenomenally.
I do think that we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't know how specific beyond that I could be.
In the United States, the Moons would spend a fortune buying hotels, newspapers, fishing fleets, and property. In a bleak Massachusetts town, they even made machine guns. In a bleak Massachusetts town, they even made machine guns. Meanwhile, Moon had found friends in high places. He sprang to the aid of Richard Nixon, accused of ordering the Watergate cover-up.
Tonight, let me explain to you what I did about Watergate after the break-in occurred, so that you can better understand
Reverend Moon
that I also
made a crusade for the rescue of President Nixon.
As Washington bayed for his resignation, Moonies demonstrated for the president.
And meanwhile, you have ABC, NBC, and CBS covering this as though this were some sort of spontaneous demonstration of Americans supporting Nixon, when in fact every single person in the park was a Moonie who'd been ordered to be there.
By Moon.
By Moon.
Meeting Nixon at the White House, Moon advised him to burn the Watergate tapes.
And there Reverend Moon saying that, Mr. President, what you have to do, ask for the forgiveness of the people.
At congressional hearings, Moon was accused of conspiring with Korean intelligence to buy influence in Washington.
Well, I'll tell you what, Colonel, we'll split the difference. How's 10 minutes?
Never before or since had we seen such a blatant attempt to influence our political, social, cultural institutions.
Could you kindly give me 5 more minutes? I said 15 minutes.
So there was no doubt to you that the KCIA and Moon were hand in hand?
There was no doubt.
The South Koreans were terrified the Americans would abandon them just as they'd abandoned South Vietnam.
Korea will be a second Vietnam. If Korea becomes a second Vietnam, Korea collapses, then there's no way the free world can survive.
The South Koreans believe Moon had the power to influence events in Washington, and according to a CIA source, were willing to pay for his help. The source claimed the money had been channeled through a company in South Korea. Congressional investigators found that the head of Korean intelligence once held a meeting with Moon's American leaders at a hotel in San Francisco.
But public and the media misunderstood him, and they thought Reverend Moon is act upon government, Korean government, or Korean CIA front. It must be funded.
By the mid-70s, Moon was at the pinnacle of his power, holding enormous rallies in American cities. The church claimed 300,000 people attended this rally in Washington.
Today, America is plagued with problems: racism, juvenile delinquency, and immorality. Christianity is declining. Communism is rising. The menace of communism is everywhere. Of all these
Privately, investigators believed Moon was part of a KCIA plan to win over the Washington establishment. He told Alan Tate Wood to find friends in the military and intelligence community.
His key strategy was, we will find some powerful man or some powerful organization, and we will find out what their agenda is, and then we will attend them and serve them, and eventually they'll come to recognize in us their greatest ally, and at that point we then begin to be able to dictate to them.
We shall never let it down. Never, never, never.
The Lord is my shepherd. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Bo-hee Pak denied allegations that his master was controlled by the KCIA.
They were trying to crush our movement through the congressional hearing.
Incredibly, Pak accused the committee chairman of being a Soviet spy. The committee, in turn, accused Moon of violating U.S. tax, immigration, and banking law.
If you were against him, if you were threatening his objectives, you were the devil.
As the committee saw it, no one realized how dangerous Moon was because they didn't bother to listen to his speeches. There will come a time when my words almost become law. If I want a certain thing, it will be done. On the Korean border, Moon seemed to expect a bloody apocalypse, out of which he would emerge leader of the United Korea and then of the world.
And he said, in this final battle, the only way for the forces of good to win may be to force the world to wake up. And he said the way we'll do that is we'll send thousands and thousands of Unification Church members and place them on the border, the demilitarized zone in between North and South Korea. And he said if the North Koreans attack, then the Unification Church members will be the first people to be killed. If we can have a lot of young people killed who are from England, France, Germany, and the United States, that will force those nations to come in on the side of South Korea. He would talk to us for hours and hours and hours about how God is searching for a nation. He wants to get Korea, but if he can't get Korea, then he'll try to get the United States. If he can get the United States, then he'll get Japan. And if he can get the United States and Japan and then England, if he can get those three nations, then he'll quickly grab 7. And once he's got 7, then he will swallow the whole world.
Loyalty at the end of the day is to him. You have to be prepared to die for him, and he says that.
In 1982, a young Korean girl arrived at Moon's estate outside New York.
It was absolutely beautiful. Big mansions, big rooms. The room that I stayed, it was like a princess room.
Moon had chosen her to marry one of his sons. She was barely 15.
Every time we see him, we have to have full bow. And he was God. He was really God for everybody.
Inside the estate, a fortress mentality prevailed.
There's inside world and outside world. There were outside people and there were us. We were the chosen people, and outside people are satanic people.
She saw church leaders arriving from Asia with bags of cash for the Moons.
It's sometimes $1 million, sometimes $2 million, sometimes 200,000. But for them, a lot of money is for their own personal use.
Publicly, Moon railed against gambling, but Nansuk says he took her and the rest. An assistant would place bets for him.
Did you say to him, Father, I thought we were supposed not to gamble?
No, of course not. That's if I wanted to die, maybe. No, no. That's we never raise any questions or doubts. We just had to be there accepting.
If Moon thought he was safe from earthly law, he was to be disillusioned. He was accused of tax evasion.
Not paying your taxes, withholding payroll taxes, paying people under the table cash so we didn't have to pay the government money. That saved Father money, so therefore it was okay. It was doing God's will, because anything that supported Moon or supported the agenda was doing God's will.
He asked God for deliverance.
He prayed on the Holy Rock every morning, and so did a lot of us. We were there all night praying for Moon. But it seems like nothing worked.
In 1984, Moon was sent to jail.
The trial judge himself said quite openly that, of course, were his religion less controversial, the government would have had less interest in pursuing the matter.
Justice will be done.
To the Moonies, their master was a victim of his beliefs, martyred by a bigoted and racist Justice Department.
But we all knew that, yes, it was tax evasion.
Released 13 months later, Moon celebrated in his own particular way.
Moon crowned himself as the emperor of the universe. And it was quite odd. The pictures were forbidden. Nobody could take pictures because it had to be absolute secret. And at that point, he became God in his eyes.
The chastened Moon realized he needed more than hotels and fishing fleets to achieve power in America. He needed his own voice in Washington. He founded the Washington Times.
And yes, one way to control this country was through the newspaper. That's how he saw.
It would counter the liberal Washington Post. The Times would become the voice of the Republican right.
The American people know the truth. And you, my friends at the Washington, to them.
Reverend Moon never sided with the political party, only sided with God.
It was like the Messiah had ridden into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. And Moon would say,
none of the prisoners survived in that prison more than 18 months.
In his book, Divine Principle, which lays out his theology, Moon says he endured suffering unimagined by anyone in history. He suffered so much he atoned for the sins of mankind and became perfect.
Reverend Moon was sentenced to death to that death camp for 5 years imprisonment.
In 1950, North Korea invaded the South. War had begun, a long confrontation between the Soviets and the West. Perversely, the Korean War saved Moon's life. UN bombers pounded the city where he was held. In the chaos, Moon was freed.
Day before, they were systematically killing all the prisoners, knowing that, UN forces coming up. Before Reverend Moon turned, luckily, the UN forces rushed the gate.
He joined thousands of refugees fleeing south to escape the communists. His followers speak with awe of how he carried an injured man across Korea.
Roughly 200 miles, walking and walking on a mountain. He carried him on the back. 80-kilogram man on the back. All the way to south. To me, that alone shows him the Messiah, to me.
For years, the Moon organization used this photo as evidence before quietly conceding it was of someone else. In a tiny shack made of US Army ration boxes, Moon founded his Unification Church. He and his followers often went hungry.
Our tiny group, very poor. Under that circumstances, he trained us to overcome temptations of food.
In the decades that followed, Moon would become rich and powerful. His anthem, inevitably, Handel's Messiah. He'd be accused of breaking laws and seeking influence. He'd make friends in high places.
To me, that's the heart of Moon's psyche, is the drive, the need for power. He's not interested in people developing and finding themselves. He's interested in people finding him and kneeling to him and bowing to him and then giving him all their strength, all their energy, all their power.
His church would be accused of brainwashing teenagers and taking their assets.
All of your money, somebody else's money, their land, their property, any kind of real or material goods they have. Your job is to get a hold of that and bring it into the organization, because outside of the organization it has no meaning, it has no value. It's property owned by Satan.
Moon would talk openly of controlling the earth. The whole world is in my hands, and I will conquer and subjugate the world.
Just as he claims to be a man of love, and yet if you look at any of his speeches will exude hatred towards those who disagree with it.
From the beginning, Moon believed that rival churches, the media, even the Korean government, were out to get him.
Just like Jesus Christ came 2,000 years ago, encountered incredible opposition of those days of the existing religion.
In Seoul in the 50s, there were stories that Moon was having sex with female converts to purify them.
There were women coming to lectures who they'd rather be at lecture than being with their husbands or with their families. So their husbands could not understand what was going on. So for them, they must be having some kind of sexual relationship. There must be something wrong is going on in that place.
However, a later FBI report claimed that women students had been expelled from university in Seoul because of sexual initiation rites with Moon and some others.
Moon claimed that since he was the perfect man, a perfect Adam, by sleeping with women, he would purify women. And he did tell me that he did those things. It was God's work.
Divorcing his first wife, he married a woman 20 years younger than himself, Hak Jae-han. He and his new wife would be the true parents of all mankind. He told his followers, love true parents more than your own self, spouse, or children.
And he said, you must know that I am your only parent and your father is bad for you. You must forget about him. We are the true parents. I am the true parent.
In the early days, Moon lived above his church. His speeches would go on for half the night.
He never slept.
Never?
Continue until usually 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Never slept. His sleep time is always less than 3 hours, only 2 or 3 hours.
The Korean War had ended in a bizarre face-off between North and South. Surreal, yet deadly. It was a microcosm of what was happening all over the world. By the new Cold War.
Reverend Moon frequently said, the communist goal is to kick out God from the planet. The communistic ideology is take over the entire world, then there's no room for God. We cannot allow God going out of this planet. We need God. Reverend Moon from the day one is truly the anti-communist.
To Moon, communist North Korea was satanic, and its Stalinist leader, Kim Il-sung, the devil.
If communists win in Cold War, and the entire world is communized, there's no room for free men to stand.
In Seoul, nobody laughed at Moon anymore. The word now was that he had powerful new friends, including Kim Jong-pil, founder of South Korea's ferocious new intelligence agency, the KCIA. It crushed dissent. In Washington, the Americans heard that Kim Jong-pil was using Moon's church as a political tool. America was where Moon would make his future.
He looked at America as a chosen nation. So, in a most crucial role must be played by America.
Rather fortunately for Moon, he arrived in America at a time of great anguish. The Vietnam War had divided the generations.
I can't hold this day.
American cities were full of teenagers looking for answers.
Understand me.
Few knew why Americans were dying in Vietnam, or raining death on a country they'd barely heard of. Moon built his church on their self-doubt.
Here was a guy who was just seemed to be totally sure. There was just this tremendous energy, tremendous force which he communicated. It was as though his whole body was going to one place, to one point.
We are not just ordinary Christians.
Teenagers would be intercepted on the street by Moonies. Often they'd be invited to some innocuous seminar.
These individuals were just unusually open and honest and friendly and caring and playful and sweet.
Catherine Mazer was taken to a house
shaped like the Garden of Eden when the Adam and Eve were created.
According to the church, it would have an airport big enough for wide-body jets and millions of acres of fertile land.
This is why he's engaged in Brazil to cultivate those wasted land into beautiful, fertile farmland, produces millions of tons of food.
It would teach the Brazilians new farming methods, educate the area's mainly Catholic population, and unite religions. People on the farm hope that Moon, now in his 80s, will spend his last years in Brazil. From here, he can communicate with his 200 other projects around the world.
I have been with him there in the Pantanal, which he considers one of the gates, one of the earthly gates of the kingdom of heaven, going at 3 o'clock in the morning with no reason except a compelling spiritual reason to go into places that nobody will go because they're not tame yet. He could get lost and nobody will find him in 10 years.
To be near their Messiah, Korean and Japanese Moonies are bussed in after a grueling flight from Asia.
And these families living with the nature, they can learn the original aspects of God that was lost after the fall of man.
His followers fish like Father Moon, work on the land, pray and procreate in small air-conditioned rooms.
And for Reverend Moon especially, a place where the families should do what they were supposed to do in the Garden of Eden, and it was done wrong, so we should do it right.
Moon has other great dreams, like a road from London to Tokyo, but it is just a dream. At New Hope, there's no airport for wide-body jets. Its manager says it rains erratically, so it's hard to grow crops. Despite Moon's talk of uniting religions, local Catholics dismiss his creed as junk theology.
But it's quite clear that in the history of mankind, always someone who came with a big idea or a new understanding was stoned. And after his death, they made a big statue and proclaimed it as a saint. It always happened.
Sealed inside his many fine houses, gazing out over tropical gardens or great oceans, Moon has had many sorrows. In 1980, his son, Hung Jin, was killed.
This Moon's child went to heaven and became the ruler of the heaven. Even Jesus came and bowed down to this child.
Moon's followers said they'd seen visions of his son taking the place of Jesus.
Because he was Moon's child, he can have this kind of position in the spiritual world, in the heaven.
A higher position
higher
than Jesus.
Position than Jesus. And he was going to hold that position until his dad comes.
As Moon saw it, to achieve his proper place in heaven, his dead son needed a wife.
And so they took his body, I suppose, in a coffin and went ahead with the marriage ceremony. He was married, the corpse was married to Bohee Pak's daughter.
Julia Moon, the daughter of Moon's right-hand man, leads his international ballet company.
And so she married with his picture in his arms, in her arms. And it was strange. But we simply accepted the fact that that was the case.
A baby was found and given to Julia Moon to bring up with her dead husband.
We had the wedding ceremony, we had entertainment.
So it was an ordinary wedding except the bridegroom wasn't there?
Yeah, exactly, yes.
Much of Moon's wealth flowed to his children. Nansuk says her husband, Hyo Jin, spent it on cocaine in Harlem. High on drugs, he would threaten her.
There were a lot of times he kept saying he was going to kill me, he was going to kill me. There was a point that I knew he was going to kill me. But I knew when he was drunk enough, he was high enough, he was capable of doing anything.
Physically abused, she fled the Moon compound with her children. At the beginning of the year 2000, Moon celebrated his 80th birthday. As some saw him, a prophet out of step with time.
In one speech, he said, it's better for men to cut off their privates, penises, and he said penis, than to engage in a homosexual act. Over time, he became more embittered, more angry with the Western world for not accepting him, for not realizing and bowing down to his messianic role.
May God bless you.
The world statesmen who speak at his conferences are a dwindling band. They include Dan Quayle, Kenneth Kaunda, and Sir Edward Heath. They applaud his work for peace, but Sir Edward can't say what he's actually achieved.
I can't name anything, no. But what I've done is to address their conference. I think this is the third occasion. No, I have no connection with Dr. Moon.
But Moon can lay claim to one crowning achievement: a reconciliation with his old enemy Kim Il-sung, the leader of North Korea. Moon agreed to invest millions in a country he once thought satanic.
Reverend Moon, in his own lifetime, has done more than any individual I have ever known in history.
Why Moon's son, Young Jin, fell to his death from the 17th floor of a hotel in Reno remains unexplained. So, finally, there's the drive and true nature of his father. Some say their assets and lives were stolen by a megalomaniac.
You know, sometimes when I think about it, the loss of time and the violation is so great that...
Others say Moon has infused their lives with meaning, and for that, by some, he's revered.
Reverend Moon will be known far more, far greater in the next 100 years, next 1,000 years. And he will be known as the man who truly brought the truth and changed the world. Not but the bullet and fire, however, by the Spirit of God and the truth of God. He brought the more change here on earth than anybody else.
And Reputations returns in 2 weeks' time here on BBC Two.
Hey folks, I just saw the Queen do something super ninja, and I'm telling her to reenact it again. Here we go. Here's what she did. She tried to close it, it didn't close, and so she...
嘘をつくなかれというタイトルでなあこうは出してるよな。嘘をつくぐらいなら宗教をやってはいけない。おめえ